Hey, Doug.
Howdy, Mauro.
How are you doing?
I am in bliss. I am surrounded by our recent hand harvest of hemp here across the pond from you and then across the continent in New Mexico. And I'm also holding a plastic goat, since I'm a goat herder, 3D printed from hemp because I'm thinking goodbye to the Pacific garbage patch.
Yeah, it sounds like the best place to be in times of the pandemic.
Very little has changed in this life, as you know, since we go back a while. Before I was reporting on cannabis hemp, let alone before becoming a regenerative hemp farmer, I was writing about the logistics of living a sustainable life in general, especially for someone as I did who grew up in the suburbs. So living on solar power and getting smarted by goats and driving on vegetable oil. These are all things I've been working on for several decades. And though I would not call myself 100%, let's say, food independent, very, very little has changed in our life here on the Funky Butte Ranch in the last year.
Yeah, it would be awesome to visit there one time because I read this book, Farewell My Subaru of yours, and when I think about it, I actually pretty often whenever someone comes up to me with the idea to go live this independent lifestyle.
Cool. Thanks for reading it.
You're welcome. Like you said, you are a hemp farmer. Aside from being totally independent, what's it like actually being a hemp farmer?
The reason why I started to actually plant hemp was because as a journalist now for several decades, I wanted to be the type of pundit, if you will, the type of communicator or, I guess the modern phrase is influencer or whatever, but just journalist who actually walks the walk rather than just talks the talk.
Mhm.
So many times, right? We just have people talking about things without doing it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to at least do it. And that's still true in the sense of why I actually put together an entire hemp product. That's totally so that if I'm going to preach these values that we'll be talking about today, these regenerative values in an enterprise and in a farming operation, that I want to be actually doing it and not just telling other people to do it. But what I did not expect was that hemp farming would prove to be the most fun that one could have outside the bedroom. It's my favorite place to be during the day. It is just a very blissful ecosystem. And my home crop, which is here in New Mexico, which is the only one that I was part of this year. Normally I'm cultivating in multiple states, helping others, growing commercially in one state, growing a home food crop elsewhere, and seed development elsewhere. This year it was all here, and it's a very small garden, and still you can experience the soil building and this ecosystem from the worms through the birds, through the bees and the other pollinators. It's a great place to spend a couple of hours, no matter how busy you are.
Well, and after the farming comes the harvest and the processing and the selling. How does this work out for you?
This year is different than most years. Here in New Mexico, I primarily harvest our very small crop by hand with my family. In fact, we just finished processing, separating the seed from the flower and the stalk. And I normally do that just for our own superfood and maybe a few small hempcrete projects. And then the flower we can make into whatever we want, for our family's use and enjoyment. Cannabinoid rich, it being hemp, it's not high in THC. It just has most of the other cannabinoids and terpenes in it. So that's the home crop. And the other thing we do here is breeding. I definitely am working on trying to develop the type of hemp variety or cultivar that is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for varieties that provide incredible nutrition. The superfood that many people know comes in everything from the hemp seed, omega balance, high in minerals. We can talk a little bit more about it. There's gamma linolenic acid, which is rare in a food, and it's associated with anti-inflammatory properties. So we eat a lot of hemp, but I'm also trying to breed varieties that I can then increase and provide to other farmers. But this is a very, very, very small crop, and this is not what I put into any commercial product. The commercial product that I do is called Hemp in Hemp, and it's a very, very simple product, a farm to table product, USDA organic. In other words, our US government's ag department has said that, come and certify that the crop is federally organic, which is really fun, by the way, when 5 years ago you could have gotten 10 years in prison for growing it. And now you have a federal organic authorization for your plant. So we harvest that crop. It's still a pretty small crop, but we grow dioecious, meaning male and female. So it's not sinsemilla, but we still use the flower. We press the seed into oil, and then we render the flower in the hemp seed oil, and that is the product. We use decarboxylation. We do it, as I like to say, the way the shaman did it. I think about double toil and trouble in a cauldron, stirring things in a cauldron. That's how I like to make hemp products. And Mauro, most important of all, I want to talk about things like packaging and all of that. So on this product, which is very small run, we use compostable labels with the sticky part is, non-toxic, and it's very, very expensive to do this on a glass bottle. And I feel it's important to demonstrate what I mean when I preach about regenerative values. The other thing is distribution radius. To me, the dream company, if you want me to shout out your hemp cannabis company or any company, everything we've talked about, lovingly cultivate organically, build the soil, package it in regenerative packaging, then deliver it in electric vehicles in a very narrow radius, in a way that builds your community and is not just about short-term profit. Transparent. Farmers are part of the enterprise, I think, not just anonymous buying of fungible CBD, let's say, on the open market, but rather the farmers run the enterprise and or are collaborating with the marketing and the entrepreneurial side as equal partners. Those are the values that are important to me, and that is why I cultivate hemp.
Yeah, when I watched this interview you did after releasing your book Too High to Fail on Conan, you said this one line about, it makes sense to end this drug war economically. And also in the book you write about the craft grow movement during your visit in California. What are the lessons that we can learn as the Netherlands as we are moving forward?
Well, first of all, I approach any conversation with a Dutch audience excitedly for a number of reasons, besides the fact that I have a lot of good friends. The folks in Hawaii, where I cultivated hemp, would say ohana, the extended family people in the Netherlands. And Netherlands, of course, got the head start in the right direction about cannabis in 1976. But more than that, going further back, hemp has been very prominent until very recent times. And then again, of course, in the modern industry. But I recently read an 1873 Dutch book. I think it's called What Comes from Hemp, and it's very poetic. It sounds like the regenerative values that I talk about when I suggest people create and run regenerative enterprises, because it's not just saying, oh, we're getting this extremely high quality hemp with a high volume and we're harvesting it better than anyone else. And look at it's saying things like, boy, it is so nice to be in the hemp field at harvest season. I think the fact that there are bees and birds here means we're going to have better hemp. This is really what I believe. I believe that in the digital age, and we who handcraft and love our hemp and build soil, which of course that means sequestering carbon and helping mitigate climate change. If you grow that way, you will win in the marketplace because your hemp is going to be higher quality, and we all want highest quality, but also transparent. There's not going to be this anonymous problem with, oh, who provided my CBD? Is it good quality? Is it legitimate? It's read the label. This is the farmer that grew it. And we can all support regional enterprises. And I'm not saying that no Dutch or other, customer would want an American product or vice versa. It's fun to experiment with varieties from all over the world. But day to day, my big suggestion is that customers seek out that value-added farmer-owned enterprise in their region. That's my message for Dutch hemp. You can do it on relatively small acreage, but the other side of it is the farmer used to think that his or her job was finished when the harvest came in. You could mend the harness and sit by the fireside, and maybe the middleman wasn't paying very good prices and you weren't getting rich. And of course, it's worse than that for many farmers today. They're deeply in debt and there's a suicide crisis with farmers worldwide, but particularly in places like India. But at least your work was done. You brought it to the harvesting facility and you were finished. Now, the farmer's work is just beginning when harvest happens because you have this whole other job of being a marketer in the digital age, and there's no guarantee of success, and it probably will take several years at least to build up an enterprise and convince retailers and customers that your product is worth the extra whatever, the extra number of euros per bottle, because it's more bioavailable and a better product. But I think it's the only way to go. Regenerative is going to be the best hemp, and we're in the ninth inning, Maro, for society. And we have to fix the climate issue. We have to mitigate climate change, or we're done as a species. So this is one way to accomplish that.
Yeah, for sure. When I watched this new David Attenborough documentary recently, and it finished on we should be giving more nature back to the world, I was really shouting it to the TV like hemp, hemp, grow hemp. I'm not sure why they don't even touch on the subject.
And really, the hemp, by the way, just let me say quickly, the reality is just very hemp is the spearhead. It's the tip that is leading what I hope is an entire biomaterials renaissance. And that's why I carry this 3D printed hemp goat everywhere I go, because we can have a reusable and compostable society, not just based on hemp, but on all biomaterials. All kinds of crop provide fiber that can provide everything from energy to reusable paper and consumer items, rocket parts, everything. There's so many good fibers out there, and hemp is just leading and showing the way. There's a reason they call it the healing of a nation. I mean, it's really a lesson, but it's not the only plant.
No, for sure. In the Netherlands, we actually have hemp farming as well, and but it's bound to a couple of really strange rules. Like, for example, the flowers cannot be processed into CBD oil here because it's not allowed to process cannabis. So what they do is they export this to Germany, where they can make it into CBD oil, and then they import it back. But now recently, they had a small win in the European Parliament, which ruled that all across Europe, industrial hemp will be allowed to 0.3%. But there's this other thing that's playing, in which the European Commission has said that they want to put CBD in the schedule of, well, where it's basically medicine and basically being a drug instead of it being an agriculture product. And it's also playing in the United States, I learned. How is this going over there?
I tend to look at policy issues surrounding cannabis hemp from a very high altitude. I'm looking 5 to 10 years ahead in general. The people that are slogging it out in the trenches now, winning the final battles of the lunacy of the war on cannabis hemp, I respect those people immensely. Activists, farmers, policymakers, even attorneys that are really working for the return of cannabis hemp in a good way. My view is very, very high altitude, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the war on cannabis in the United States, it's effectively over. The final removal of psychoactive cannabis from our federal narcotics laws is coming very, very soon. And as you know, state after state continues to legalize, and the federal government in the US has basically taken a hands-off approach. So it's effectively legal for tens of millions of Americans, all cannabis. So it's easy for me to take a high altitude view and say, here's what is the only logical approach. And so I'll tell you the specifics of how I see that. But I wanted to mention it because this word, when I say something is insane, I don't use that lightly. I'm a person who has a life that is really, really free from interaction with bureaucracy and authority. I mean, that's the way I like it. I've lived very remote and rural for most of my life. And so if I'm going to tap in and if I'm going to participate in the official system for anything, I'm not going to stand by for any nonsense, especially when it is truly insane. When people are making rules that are based on as if cannabis lost the war on cannabis. But guess what?
Mm.
Cannabis won the war on cannabis. And so that the winners decide what's going to happen. And so whenever I hear anything related to cannabis hemp that is not what I think is the best thing for the earth or for individuals' human rights, such as the right to grow any plant that they want at their home without any kind of interference from authorities or government at all, I don't stand for it. I don't tolerate it. And because as an author now and as a farmer and as a journalist, I have a mouthpiece and I have folks, I feel very lucky in authority who are willing to listen to me. It's a very mutually respected situation. And not just me, by the way. There's lots of other people who are
Mhm.
also speaking these truths. But for instance, Congress people, senators will listen. Really, also in the U.S., when it comes to hemp specifically, today defined on that 0.3% THC by dry weight. The administrators of the hemp programs in my own state of New Mexico, I just got a text from him. We correspond regularly. My cultivation partner in Vermont is the state hemp administrator. We grow hemp together. So we have a very like-minded approach of what we see in the future. So this is a very long-winded way of saying that this is the end game as many of us see it. The end game is something called THC irrelevance until the retail level. And what that means is on the federal level in the US, and I'm sure we can map this to the Netherlands and other countries, but on the federal level in the US, there will be no cannabis definition based on THC. It will be like alcohol. Cannabis is just cannabis. And a state or a locality may choose a THC level of its choice, above which cannabis flower that reaches the retail market will be regulated as though it were adult use, alcohol or medicinal use, for instance. Below that level, nobody's business. It's like growing tomatoes. It's an agricultural product like any other crop. And this is very, very important because we need farmers. There's an independent farming crisis. We have this big farm aid institution in the US founded by Willie Nelson and great artists like Neil Young are always involved in it. And we don't have hedge fund aid and we don't have lawyer aid. We have farm aid because we've had a farm crisis in the US. And the last demographic that we want to burden with regulations such as THC testing of any kind are farmers. It should make no difference what the THC level of a farmer's crop is if she intends, for instance, to market only the seed as food or only the fiber as part of a fiber co-op for, let's say, animal bedding or hempcrete building. And even if she wishes to market the flower, if the flower that is reaching customers does not exceed a state-determined threshold on THC, even that is just an agricultural product that she can market to her food co-op, sell at her farmer's market, or if she really wants to, sell it to a wholesaler or a supermarket as though it were tomatoes or beans or any other crop, quinoa, let's say. I always love those ancient grains. So that is the end game. And all of this talk now of will CBD be considered a pharmaceutical or a dietary supplement? Look, it's important for people that are playing within this game right now to get it done. It's very important that in the very short term, all non-psychoactive hemp is allowed to be marketed as a dietary supplement without any kind of nonsense about drug regulation or any of that business. Of course. But to my mind, I never think about CBD, Merrill. I'm a whole plant guy. I don't go and buy pills at a drugstore. I eat healthy food, and I eat a lot of herbs. I eat adaptogen herbs, and I eat a ton of roots like ginger and turmeric. And I don't think about things in terms of the lycopene in my tomatoes. if you know what I mean. I just think about healthy tomatoes. So all this talk of regulating one cannabinoid out of 110 known cannabinoids, to me, that is short-term thinking, and it's on the wrong side of history, and we will get beyond it. In fact, I'm a big advocate of creating an entire new food category called living craft level foods that includes small batch hemp, where you're exempt from all this kind of nonsense about worrying about the chemistry within the plant. It's just a healthy food that you're providing. So I hope I've been clear about lucid when I talk about the long-term game plan. And all I can say to people who are dealing with true insanity of the attempts to regulate one cannabinoid and call it a pharmaceutical, of course, fight against that relentlessly. It will not stand. It's the wrong side of history, and we won the war on cannabis. So get ready to celebrate and ask for what we all want. Don't accept any insanity, because cannabis won, and we decide what the policy is going to be in the future.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking, yeah, this counts indeed for the industrial hemp, but counts for normal cannabis as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm a big believer that the delineation between cannabis and hemp is artificial, and it's recent. So, first of all, in the US and Canada especially, the 0.3 level was arbitrarily chosen. That was their words, by researchers in a Canadian paper in 1976. They were just trying to pick a level that they thought you could smoke as much as you want and you won't get high, and so they picked 0.3, and they've all, in the paper it says we arbitrarily chose it. And so we just have to get past the stigma of THC, and it's all one plant again. And of course, again, like I said, if the THC level is above some level, let's say 3%, not 0.3%, if the THC level is above 3%, a state like, Oklahoma or a region of the Netherlands can say, okay, if it's above 3%, it has to be regulated like an adult use product. You can't just go in and buy it at any age or whatever. But below that, the burden will be completely off the farmer. It is one plant. Another example is in the US, prior to the initiation of cannabis prohibition here in 1937, Kentucky for the previous half century had been the leading hemp producer and was thought of worldwide as really having the highest quality hemp. And nobody THC tested it. Today, I'm wearing a lot of hemp right now. Today, most of it is grown in China, although some of it's grown by Dutch-owned companies in Romania and elsewhere. But in China, nobody's going out there with a liquid spectrometer and testing the flowers of the Chinese fiber crop. They are just growing the crop that they believe will be the best fiber. And of course, that's how it should be. Again, this word insane. I do not use this word lightly. But if you are telling a farmer to grow an inferior crop that will not make the best quality crop, it will not make the best fiber or the most nutritious seed, because maybe if someone harvested the flower and smoked it, it might be 1.6% THC, and no, will they get high? That is insane, and it is happening. I got an incredible note, just an incredible note on this, insane front a year or so ago. I was invited to have a cultivar that I've been developing for a number of years. I was invited to have it introduced in a trial in the US state of North Dakota. And all through the season, my colleagues and friends were sending back these pictures of my cultivar. I say this very humbly because I do not consider myself an expert farmer. It was just beautiful. It was beautiful. Okay. And I got a note at the end of a season, "Dear Doug," from the professor that was doing this study. "Dear Doug, once again, thank you for participating in our trial. Your samurai variety has grown the best by far, visually, of any of the varieties that we tried. It's just a fantastic cultivar from that perspective. However, it tested at 0.51. I can't remember what. 0.51. This is such a small amount. Even 5% would be a small amount, but 0.5. Therefore, we are recommending that farmers not use this variety in North Dakota, and we are going to recommend that they use other varieties that have been tested this year." So thank you very much. And props to this guy for giving me his honest opinion and all that business, right? And he's bound by certain laws and all that stuff. But let's translate this. He's saying, "Dear Doug, We are not using the best hemp because we're pretending that there is still a war on cannabis, and we're telling farmers to grow a shittier variety, a crap variety. Well, let me be more kind. We are a less productive variety, we're suggesting. So let's populate our American hemp with not the best hemp because we still are pretending that there's a war on cannabis. That, my friend, is insanity, and we are not going to stand for it. We humans are not going to stand for it. It's a human right to cultivate what you want to eat, and the war on cannabis is over, and we will get there to THC irrelevance. But boy, man, we cannot stand for that.
How long do you think it's still going to take? Because now with these elections coming up, apart from the presidential elections, there's also in 4 states they're going to vote about whether it's going to be legal or not. We, as Europe watching this, we need the United States to go first because of all of the banking connections that are there. That's how I see it and how I feel about it. Because right now, even here in the Netherlands, we have banking problems because there's parts of the bank that's connected to the United States, and then they're bound by the federal law, which says you cannot do any business with cannabis businesses. So, when is this bullshit going to be over, you think?
Excellent question. I love wielding the crystal ball because thus far in my career, when I have wielded the crystal ball, it's proved accurate. So I look really smart afterwards, but it's just like, I'm assuming it's like betting on sports or something. It's like, it'll happen or it's not happening. But, in 2008, I researched the book about sustainable psychoactive cannabis. The book that is called Too High to Fail, which you were kind enough to mention earlier. And that's where I first met our mutual friend, Derek Bergman, the great founder of UOC Netherlands and just a great human being and journalist when I was on a European book tour. In 2013, quick side note, that book tour was managed by my friend Michel Degens of Hasselt, Belgium, who is currently being prosecuted for trying to work on the cannabis hemp plant. So I urge everyone to support him and look into his story. But in that book in 2011, I said cannabis is going to start to be legalized in the U.S. in the very soon, in the next year or so. And then our first few states did do that the next year or so. After all, long struggles, we started legalizing in the U.S. In the U.S., federal law preempts all other laws. So we first need to remove all cannabis from our Federal Narcotics Act, called the Controlled Substances Act. We have already removed cannabis that has 0.3% or less. Today, it's called hemp, but as we've been discussing today, it's just cannabis that has a certain THC level. Cannabis at 0.3 or less is now an agricultural product in the US. It's legal. I forgot to mention, we are in a huge effort to immediately raise the THC definition to 1% in the US. So you were talking about the US has to go first on all cannabis. You're absolutely right, but I urge the world to pay attention. I predict in the next year, going to raise our hemp definition to 1%, which is a start. As I said, we want to get to federal THC irrelevance and letting the states decide. But 1% is going to help because, especially for dioecious hemp, for food and fiber, many varieties want more THC in their system than 0.3, not much, and 1 is a good start. So we want to join Thailand and Switzerland and parts of Australia and Ecuador that are already at 1% on their hemp definition. But that's just a start. And I urge everyone everywhere listening to this to work for that as a start. But to answer your question of when do I think federal cannabis legalization will happen in the US, we have the support now of Congress. Congress wants it to be legalized. So the question is, how does it get signed? I think that there's a chance that it will get signed. Unfortunately, we don't have a candidate in the US in this election that has it as a high priority. And so it wouldn't be as easy as if there were a more cannabis-friendly candidate who are running for president, because as you know, in our system, the president has to sign bills. So if there were a friendly candidate, Congress would pass a great cannabis legalization bill, and the president would stand at the podium and say, "I am proudly signing this today." That's coming, but it's not coming this election. What's going after this election? That doesn't mean that cannabis won't be legalized. What it means is, if it is legalized, it's likely going to be part of a big negotiation in a bigger kind of bill where it's kind of it's done as part of, with less fanfare, as part of a bigger bill. In short, I'm rubbing the crystal ball now, or I should say I'm rubbing the hemp goat right now. I think yes, it will happen in the US in the next 4 years. We may have some more mop-up work to do after that, in other words, to make sure that it's done in the best possible way. But I do think cannabis will be entirely removed from our Controlled Substances Act in the next 4 years.
Okay, interesting. That's a different take on it than I have heard or read elsewhere for sure. Now, you're also doing these online hemp courses I saw. How's this working out?
Thanks for asking about that. Because I believe hemp is a very big tent. Hemp and cannabis is a big tent. For instance, I really think building soil, growing outdoors in healthy soil is very important, as we've been discussing. I think it makes the best hemp, and I think it's important in terms of everybody's mission here to keep humanity alive by living a regenerative life and also running a regenerative enterprise. So hemp being a big tent, I'm very appreciative, for instance, to the people who were able to get cannabis hemp to people during Prohibition. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes that meant growing indoors, let's say. So I'm not going to be critical of people that have cultivated by one mode or another. Even during Prohibition, I'm of the belief that the Emerald Triangle farmers, let's say in the U.S., who cultivated outdoors, that they were growing the best cannabis. I really believe that. But nonetheless, I want to be inclusive and say that I don't intend to criticize any mode, but the mode that I embrace and the mode that I try to practice is called regenerative hemp. And that is organic, yes, outdoor, yes, build your soil. So this hemp course is a very comprehensive 10-chapter online course that people can take from anywhere on the planet at their own pace. And it covers everything from building the microbes in your soil through cultivation, harvesting, genetics, permitting, packaging, marketing, and regenerative entrepreneurial efforts. So all sides of the plant as well, whether you're growing sensimilla for cannabinoid market like CBD and CBG, or if you're growing seed and fiber, or as I like to do, all sides of the plant, or if you're growing to build soil, which we call phytoremediation. Side note, I'm very glad to report that a cultivar that I've been developing here in New Mexico has been used in a first phase study at a college here in New Mexico and has shown to be cleaning soil, soil that is tainted by uranium from mining in our Four Corners region of New Mexico. So I'm really proud to have provided the genetics that are showing promise in phytoremediation. Of course, the hemp does most of the work. I'm just a midwife, but I'm very proud that the genetics that I've been working on are showing promise, and the studies are continuing. So that's something, if folks want to subscribe to my mailing list or take the hemp course, you can keep in touch through my social media or my dispatches on the progress of that and all my work. But as far as the hemp course goes, it's 10 comprehensive chapters. And for instance, in soil building, I discuss how I like to hike into the wet part of a watershed and collect a little bit of mycelium and good fungus, and build it into a compost tea that I then feed to the soil. And this is about better hemp later on. When you're building a happy soil, you're making it easy for your hemp when the soil is thriving on the microbial level. So that's the level of detail that we get into in the course. And all of it, information on the course and signing up for the dispatches on my newsletter. And if you are interested in my books and audiobooks, they're all at my website at dougfine.com.
Cool. And people can sign up from all around the globe, right?
Yes, for the course, absolutely. You can sign up and take the course at your own pace. It's live right now, and you'll see a link right on my homepage. It says, you click on my goat's head, it says, take Doug Fine, register for Doug Fine's hemp course.
Yeah, just so. And you just got a new book out. It's actually your 6th book already, American Hemp Farmer. How has been the reception of that so far?
Thank you for asking that. Good. I felt really good about this book. I thought I was ready to write some comedic fiction. Like I thought after you mentioned Farewell My Subaru, my book about trying to live without petroleum and keeping digital age comforts, and then writing Too Hot to Fail about cannabis, and then printing a hemp monograph, and then writing another book, Hemp Bound, about hemp, which, by the way, speaks to the managing director at Hempflax, the Dutch hemp company. So I thought I was ready to write about something else. And the folks that published Hemp Bound said, how about just a really immersive, practical, if of course it's going to be funny if you're writing it, because I always write about myself making mistakes. It's always about self-deprecating, slips and foibles, whether it's getting electrocuted by solar panels, outsmarted by goats, or, driving 50 pounds of hemp nearly into a state that doesn't have as friendly laws as where I was cultivating at the moment. I said, okay, so I wrote this new book, and it's called American Hemp Farmer. It could really be called Human Hemp Farmer. It's about how independent farmers can once again make a living by becoming farmer entrepreneurs while mitigating climate change. And I know this sounds grand, but also while helping save humanity by mitigating climate change. So to some degree, it's a look at a whole season, and it's a step-by-step guide of how to do it. But I hope it makes people laugh, and it's available in book, ebook, and audiobook.
Wow. Yeah, Derek already has it, so I hope to borrow it someday.
Yeah, you got it. And I really appreciate that you're doing this podcast, and I hope it's very successful.
Yes, thank you. You're now the 15th guest, and yeah, I think we've had a good stream of conversation up until now. Is there something you would like to still talk about before we end it?
I think I'd like to make the point that I call connecting the dots in our work and our lives. Now, folks can listen to this podcast from all over the world, but I know from my many good Dutch friends that many Dutch folks are proud of the pragmatic nature of the Dutch character, the understanding of how things work and how people are, and working to make it work within within a sort of Venn diagram of decent morals, but also understanding human nature. And so I love that about Dutch people. If I'm being accurate, we of course never want to generalize, but we are talking about the place that invented the corporation, right? The first corporation. And so I understand about pragmatism all over. And that said, when I say connecting the dots in our work and our lives, I'm talking about this issue of the climate situation is at a tipping point. And in my view, there's no reason that we cannot readjust everything that we do as a society now, as this worldwide collection of humans and the planet and everything else that lives with us here, including those microbes in the soil who are my new best friends, alongside the hemp and cannabis, because we both nurture the hemp and cannabis plant. But we don't really have time to sort of bargain and say, well, yeah, let's give a cannabis example. Yes, of course, it uses a lot of petroleum energy to run my indoor hemp cultivation facility, but I really want to do it in this way where I can be growing year round, and I don't want to have to build soil that's expensive. I don't want to have to grow outside where it can rain and hurt my crop. So I'm just going to, for now, provide cannabis that's, not grown in real soil, and that's, using a lot of energy in a greenhouse to keep it warm with petroleum heat, whatever, through the winter. I'm not intending to be judgmental. I'm just asking that we all now consider taking baby steps to connect the dots in our work and our life. Nobody is perfect, right? If we're going to get on a plane somewhere someday, if that happens again, nobody wants to go to algae or solar planes more than the airline companies, because they don't like spending money on fossil fuels. They don't like the vicissitudes of Middle Eastern politics on petroleum and whatnot. They'd rather have a solar panel that would work for free. Their profits would go up. We all want the same thing. We can keep our good life going if we work towards taking baby steps. For the hemp and cannabis farmer, producer, entrepreneur, I urge folks to consider, even on a small scale, cultivating outdoors, educating the customer that you're building soil. Tell the customer how much carbon you are sequestering. Build soil and be proud that your product is not only the best quality, but is doing the most good for all of our grandchildren. For the customer, when we think of connecting the dots, it's please in all of your purchases, not just hemp cannabis, think about these regenerative values. Try to shop locally. Try to support local producers of your food and of everything. And if we really think this way, I think humanity has a chance. So yeah, thanks to everyone, and thanks for allowing me to be able to, as a job, say what I really believe.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I think it's a very good message also for what the future will hold here in the Netherlands.
Thanks for giving me the mouthpiece.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, thank you so much for joining me here on this podcast, and yes, I wish you all the best over there in New Mexico.
My pleasure, Mauro, and I look forward to us hanging out again, more good times in the Netherlands and elsewhere.
For sure, there will be a lot to talk about. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.